The sound of her own blood dripping onto the barracks floor was the only thing Emily Carter could hear as she lay crumpled in her army quarters at 12:47 a.m. Her lip was split, her left eye was swelling shut, and her ribs screamed with every shallow breath she tried to take. But what hurt most wasn't the physical pain, it was watching her husband Ryan stand in the doorway, arms crossed, doing absolutely nothing while his brother Nathan wiped blood off his knuckles. "Maybe next time you'll learn to keep your mouth shut about family business," Nathan sneered, stepping over her like she was nothing more than debris on the floor. "Some things ain't meant for outsiders to know." Emily tried to speak, but only a weak cough came out. She had been married to Ryan for 3 years, served her country for 5, and saved lives as an army medic for countless missions. But in that moment, beaten down in her own home by someone who was supposed to be family, she felt more alone than she ever had in the middle of a war zone. Ryan finally moved, but not to help her. Instead, he picked up the scattered papers from her desk, the evidence she had gathered about Nathan's illegal activities. The evidence that had started this whole nightmare. "You should have listened to me, Em," Ryan said, his voice cold and distant. "I told you to stay out of it. Nathan's my blood. You were just my wife." We're past tense. The word hit her harder than Nathan's fists had. Emily had always been strong. Growing up in Detroit, she learned early that life wouldn't give you anything easy. Her mother worked double shifts at the hospital, and her father had left when she was 12. The military had given her purpose, structure, and a way to help people. Being a medic meant she could save lives, make a difference, be someone who mattered. She had met Ryan at a military function 2 years into her service. He was charming, funny, and seemed to understand the demands of military life since his father had been in the Navy. They dated for a year before getting married in a small ceremony on base. At first, everything seemed perfect. Ryan supported her career, encouraged her goals, and made her feel like she had finally found her person. But things started changing about 6 months ago. Ryan became secretive, taking phone calls in other rooms, going out at odd hours, and getting defensive when she asked questions. Then Nathan started showing up more often. Ryan's older brother had always been trouble in and out of jail, mixed up with the wrong people, always needing money or a place to crash. The breaking point came 2 weeks ago when Emily accidentally overheard a phone conversation between Ryan and Nathan. They were talking about moving packages, meeting at the docks, and splitting profits. It didn't take a genius to figure out they were involved in something illegal. As a member of the military, Emily had a duty to report illegal activities, especially when they involved someone with potential access to base resources through her. She had tried to talk to Ryan first, hoping he would end whatever he was doing with Nathan before she had to make it official. That conversation had ended with Ryan yelling at her, telling her she didn't understand family loyalty, and that some things were more important than her Boy Scout honor code. When she realized Ryan wasn't going to stop, Emily started gathering evidence. She documented the suspicious phone calls, took pictures of Nathan's expensive new car despite having no legal job, and kept records of the strange visitors who came by at odd hours. Tonight, Nathan had found her evidence folder. Now, as she watched Ryan help Nathan gather up all her carefully collected proof, Emily realized that the man she had married, the man she had trusted with her heart and her life, had chosen his criminal brother over his wife who was risking everything to do the right thing. "The military police are going to ask questions when I show up looking like this," Emily managed to say, tasting blood with every word. Nathan laughed. "You ain't going to tell nobody nothing. Because if you do, we'll make sure everyone knows about your little drinking problem." Emily's blood ran cold. 6 months ago, she had gone through a rough patch after losing a patient on a particularly difficult mission. She had turned to alcohol to cope and had a few incidents of drinking too much off duty. She had gotten help, gone to counseling, and hadn't touched alcohol in 4 months. But if Nathan and Ryan reported those incidents now, it could end her military career. "That's right," Ryan added, his voice cruel. "One word from us about your drinking, maybe some evidence of bottles hidden in your quarters, and you'll be dishonorably discharged faster than you can say court-martial. No job, no pension, no benefits. Is your precious integrity worth losing everything?" As Emily struggled to sit up against the wall, she looked at Ryan, really looked at him. This wasn't the man she had married. This was a stranger wearing her husband's face, threatening to destroy her life to protect his brother's criminal activities. But Ryan had made one mistake. He assumed that Emily Carter, the woman who had pulled wounded soldiers from hostile territory, who had performed life-saving surgery under enemy fire, who had dedicated her life to protecting others, would simply roll over and accept this betrayal. He was wrong. As Nathan and Ryan left her quarters, taking her evidence with them and warning her to keep quiet, Emily made a decision. She wasn't going to be their victim. She wasn't going to let them destroy her career or her life. And she definitely wasn't going to let Nathan continue whatever illegal activities he was involved in. Emily Carter was a soldier, a medic, and a fighter. She had faced enemies before, but never ones that shared her last name. This war was going to be different from any she had fought before, but she was going to win it. The blood was still dripping from her lip, but Emily was already planning her next move. Emily spent the rest of the night sitting on her quarters floor, back against the wall, staring at the blood stains on the gray carpet. Every part of her body hurt, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional devastation of watching the man she had loved for 3 years choose violence over her safety. When the first light of dawn crept through her window, Emily forced herself to stand. She caught her reflection in the small mirror above her sink and barely recognized the woman looking back at her. Her left eye was completely swollen shut, her lip was twice its normal size, and bruises were beginning to form along her jawline. But her eyes, the eye she could still see out of, held something different than the broken woman from a few hours ago. There was determination there. Still. Emily had been trained to think clearly under pressure, to make life or death decisions when chaos surrounded her. This situation was no different. She needed to approach it like a mission, assess the damage, identify the objectives, and execute a plan. First, she needed medical attention, but she had to be smart about it. Going to the base hospital would create an official record, and she needed to control the narrative before Nathan and Ryan could spread their lies about her supposed drinking problem. She grabbed her phone and called the one person she trusted completely, Sergeant First Class Patricia Pat Rodriguez, her closest friend and fellow medic. Pat answered on the second ring despite the early hour. "Emily? What's wrong? You sound terrible." "I need help, Pat. Can you come to my quarters? And bring a medical kit." "On my way." 5 minutes. Pat Rodriguez had been Emily's mentor since she arrived at Fort Campbell. Pat was 15 years older, had served in multiple deployments, and had a way of seeing through people's lies that made her an excellent soldier and an even better friend. When Pat arrived and saw Emily's condition, her face went through a range of emotions: shock, anger, and then cold determination. "Who did this to you?" Pat asked, gently examining Emily's injuries. Emily told her everything. Pat listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with every detail. When Emily finished, Pat sat back and looked her straight in the eye. "You know what you have to do, right? Leave Ryan. File for divorce. Report Nathan." "Exactly. And you know it's going to be ugly." "I know." Pat started treating Emily's injuries with military precision. "Your lip needs stitches, but we can do that here. The eye will heal on its own, but you're going to have bruising for at least 2 weeks. Your ribs are bruised but not broken. I've seen enough combat injuries to know the difference." As Pat worked, Emily felt herself getting stronger. Having someone believe her, support her, and help her made all the difference. "Pat, they're going to try to destroy my career. They know about the drinking incidents from 6 months ago." Pat paused in her work. "Emily, I was the one who recommended you for counseling. I was the one who helped you get clean. I know how hard you worked to get your life back on track. Anyone who tries to use your recovery against you will have to go through me first." After Pat finished treating her injuries, Emily took a long hot shower and tried to wash away the feeling of Nathan's hands on her. She had showered after difficult missions before, trying to wash off the memory of blood and violence, but this felt different. This was personal. This was family. When she came out of the bathroom, Pat was sitting at Emily's small desk, writing in a notebook. "What are you doing?" "Documentation. Time, date, nature of injuries, your account of what happened. If this goes to court, and it probably will, we need to have everything recorded properly from day one." Emily sat down across from Pat and looked at her friend's careful handwriting documenting the worst night of her life. Seeing it written down in official language made it real in a way that was both terrifying and empowering. "Pat, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Always." "Do you think I'm making a mistake? Ryan is right about one thing: Nathan is his blood. Family loyalty is important. Maybe I should have just stayed out of their business." Pat set down her pen and looked at Emily with the expression she usually reserved for young soldiers who needed a reality check. "Emily Carter, you listen to me right now. Family loyalty does not mean protecting criminals. Family loyalty does not mean allowing someone to beat up your spouse. And family loyalty definitely does not mean standing by while someone commits crimes that could hurt innocent people." Pat leaned forward. "You took an oath when you joined the military. You swore to protect and defend. That doesn't just apply to foreign enemies, Emily. It applies to protecting people from criminals like Nathan, even when those criminals are related to your husband. But what if I lose everything? My career, my home, my financial stability? Then you'll build it back. Because that's what strong people do. And Emily, you are one of the strongest people I know. You've saved lives in combat zones. You've worked your way up from nothing to become one of the best medics in this unit. You've overcome addiction and personal loss. You think Nathan and Ryan can break someone like that? Emily felt tears starting to form, but they weren't tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of relief. For the first time since last night, she felt like maybe she could actually get through this. What do I do first? Pat smiled grimly. First, we take pictures of your injuries. Then you call the military police and file a report. Then you call a lawyer and file for divorce. Then we make sure Nathan faces consequences for what he did to you. What about Ryan? What about him? He made his choice last night. He chose to let his brother assault his wife rather than do the right thing. He chose his criminal family over his marriage. Those were his decisions, Emily. Now you get to make yours. Emily nodded. Pat was right. Ryan had made his choice, and now it was time for Emily to make hers. One more thing, Pat said, closing her notebook. From now on, you're not alone in this. I've got your back, and so do a lot of other good people on this base. Nathan and Ryan think they can intimidate you into silence, but they have no idea what they're really up against. Emily stood up and looked at herself in the mirror again. The injuries were still there, the bruises were still forming, but something else was different now. She looked like a soldier again. She looked like a fighter. Let's do this, she said. Pat grinned. Now that's the Emily Carter I know. By 0800 hours, Emily was sitting in the office of Captain James Morrison, the base's military police commander. Her injuries were still visible despite Pat's careful medical treatment, but Emily held herself with the straight-backed posture of a soldier making an official report. Captain Morrison was a career military man with 22 years of experience and a reputation for fairness. He listened to Emily's account without interruption, taking detailed notes and asking clarifying questions when necessary. Specialist Carter, I need to ask you this directly. Are you certain you want to file formal charges against Nathan Sullivan and pursue this through military and civilian courts? Yes, sir. Absolutely certain. You understand that this will likely become complicated, given that the primary suspect is your brother-in-law and your husband was present during the assault? I understand, sir. But I also understand that filing this report is my duty as a soldier and my right as a citizen. Captain Morrison nodded approvingly. Good answer. I'm going to assign Detective Sergeant Lisa Park to your case. She specializes in domestic violence situations and has experience dealing with cases that involve military personnel and their families. Within an hour, Emily was meeting with Detective Park, a sharp-eyed woman in her early 40s who had a reputation for being thorough and tough. Park reviewed Emily's statement, examined the photographs Pat had taken of her injuries, and asked detailed questions about Nathan's criminal activities. Specialist Carter, you mentioned that you overheard conversations about moving packages and meeting at docks. Do you remember any specific names, places, or dates mentioned in these conversations? Emily pulled out a small notebook. I started keeping notes after the first suspicious conversation I overheard. I have dates, times, and as much detail as I could remember. Detective Park's eyebrows went up as she reviewed Emily's careful documentation. This is excellent work. You've been thinking like an investigator. I'm a medic, ma'am. Documentation and attention to detail are part of my training. Well, that training is going to help us build a strong case. I'm going to start by interviewing witnesses and checking into Nathan Sullivan's recent activities. I'll also need to speak with your husband. Emily's stomach tightened at the mention of Ryan, but she kept her voice steady. Detective Park, I should inform you that I'm planning to file for divorce. My husband made it clear last night that he prioritizes his loyalty to his brother over my safety or the law. I understand. That actually makes things cleaner from an investigation standpoint. No concerns about spousal privilege or conflicted loyalties. After leaving the police station, Emily's next stop was the base legal office. Staff Sergeant Jennifer Wright, the paralegal specialist, helped Emily understand her options for divorce proceedings. Since you're both military and stationed at the same base, we need to be careful about how we handle this, SSG Wright explained. You'll want a civilian lawyer for the divorce itself, but I can help you understand the military aspects: housing, benefits, security clearance implications. Security clearance implications? If your husband is involved in his brother's criminal activities, that could affect his clearance status. And depending on what kind of criminal activity we're talking about, it could be serious. Emily felt a complex mix of emotions about Ryan potentially losing his security clearance. Part of her was angry enough to want him to face consequences for his choices. But another part, the part that had loved him for 3 years, felt sad about the career implications for him. G. Wright seemed to read her thoughts. It's normal to have mixed feelings about this, Specialist Carter. But remember, you didn't create this situation. You're just dealing with the consequences of other people's choices. By afternoon, Emily had an appointment with Rebecca Chen, a civilian attorney who specialized in military divorces. Attorney Chen's office was off base, giving Emily her first real sense of the civilian world she might need to navigate alone. Based on what you've told me, this should be a relatively straightforward divorce, Attorney Chen explained. No children, limited shared assets, and clear grounds for dissolution due to your husband's failure to protect you from assault. What about the threats Nathan and Ryan made about reporting false information about my drinking? Attorney Chen made notes in Emily's file. That's actually witness intimidation and potentially filing a false police report. If they follow through on those threats, they could face additional criminal charges. We'll document everything and be prepared to respond if they try that route. How long will the divorce take? In Tennessee, there's a 60-day waiting period for uncontested divorces. If your husband contests it, or if we need to sort out complex asset division, it could take longer. But given the circumstances, I suspect he'll want this resolved quickly and quietly. That evening, Emily sat in her quarters, the same space where she'd been attacked less than 24 hours earlier, and wrote a letter to Ryan. She had decided that he deserved to hear about the divorce from her directly, rather than being served papers without warning. The letter was short and to the point. Ryan, I am filing for divorce. After what happened last night, I cannot continue to be married to someone who would allow his brother to assault me and then threaten my career when I try to do the right thing. I have filed a police report against Nathan for assault. I have also reported the illegal activities I observed. These were not decisions I made lightly, but they were decisions I had to make as both a soldier and a person who believes in doing what's right. You had a choice last night. You could have protected your wife from your brother's violence. Instead, you chose to participate in threatening me and trying to cover up criminal activity. That choice has consequences. I will be staying in base housing until the divorce is final. All communication between us should go through our attorneys. Emily. After sealing the letter, Emily felt a strange sense of relief. For 3 years, she had tried to be the perfect military wife, supportive, understanding, flexible about Ryan's needs and career. She had compromised her own goals, made excuses for his behavior, and tried to see his perspective even when he was clearly wrong. But being the perfect wife hadn't protected her from being beaten in her own home. Being understanding and supportive hadn't prevented her husband from choosing criminals over his marriage vows. Emily realized that she had been so focused on being what she thought Ryan wanted that she had lost sight of who she actually was. A strong, capable woman who had earned her place in the military through hard work and dedication. A person who believed in justice, integrity, and protecting others. She wasn't going to apologize for those values anymore. Her phone buzzed with a text from Pat. How did today go? Want to grab dinner at the mess hall? Emily smiled as she typed back. Today was hard but good. Yes to dinner. I have a lot to tell you. As she prepared to leave her quarters for dinner with Pat, Emily caught sight of herself in the mirror again. The bruises were darker now, and her swollen eye was beginning to change colors. But for the first time since the attack, she liked what she saw in the mirror. She saw a survivor. She saw a fighter. She saw a woman who was finally ready to put herself first. 3 days after filing her report, Emily was called back to the military police station for a follow-up meeting with Detective Park. The detective's office was filled with case files, crime scene photos, and a large whiteboard covered with notes and connections drawn in different colored markers. Specialist Carter, we've made significant progress on your case, and I wanted to update you on what we've discovered. Detective Park turned to her whiteboard, which now had Nathan Sullivan written at the center with various lines connecting to other names and locations. Based on the information you provided and our preliminary investigation, Nathan Sullivan appears to be involved in a drug distribution network operating between Fort Campbell and Nashville. We've identified at least 3 other associates and confirmed suspicious financial activity in his accounts. Emily felt a mix of vindication and sadness. She had been right about Nathan's criminal activities, but that meant Ryan had chosen to protect drug dealers over his own wife. What about the assault charges? Those are proceeding separately. We have your testimony, the medical documentation from Sergeant Rodriguez, the photographs of your injuries, and your detailed notes about the events leading up to the attack. It's a strong case. Detective Park sat down across from Emily. However, I need to prepare you for what's coming. Nathan Sullivan's attorney is claiming that you attacked him first and that he was defending himself. They're also claiming that you have a history of alcohol abuse and that your testimony is unreliable. Emily had expected this, but it still felt like a punch to the stomach. Detective, I completed alcohol counseling 4 months ago. I haven't had a drink since then, and I have documentation of my successful completion of the program. I know. Sergeant Rodriguez provided us with the counseling records and a statement about your recovery. We also have statements from your commanding officers about your excellent duty performance over the past 4 months. Their claims aren't going to hold up. What about Ryan? Have you interviewed him? Detective Park's expression became carefully neutral. We have. Your husband is claiming that he wasn't present during the alleged assault and that he has no knowledge of his brother's criminal activities. Emily stared at the detective. He's lying. He was standing right there. He helped Nathan gather up my evidence files. I know. And we're going to prove that. We've requested phone records, financial records, and we're interviewing neighbors who might have seen or heard what happened that night. Lies have a way of falling apart when you examine them closely. Over the next week, Emily settled into a routine of military duties during the day and legal preparations in the evening. She was still working as a medic, treating soldiers and maintaining her professional responsibilities, but everyone on base knew about her situation. Some people were supportive, others seemed uncomfortable around her, and a few openly questioned whether she should have kept family business private. The mixed reactions from her colleagues was harder than Emily had expected. She had always been well regarded on base, known for her competence, reliability, and friendly personality. Now she felt like people were looking at her differently, some with pity, others with judgment. It was Pat who helped her put this into perspective during one of their regular evening walks around the base. Emily, you know what these reactions tell me? They tell me that you're doing something that makes people uncomfortable because it forces them to think about what they would do in your situation. What do you mean? Some people look at you and think, I would never let that happen to me, which makes them feel superior and safe. Others look at you and think, what if that happened to me? Would I be brave enough to do what she's doing? That second group, they're uncomfortable because you're challenging them to be better. And the people who think I should have kept quiet? Pat stopped walking and turned to face Emily. Those people are telling you that they value the appearance of harmony over actual justice. They would rather have a quiet lie than a loud truth. Do you really care what people like that think about you? Emily considered this. No. I guess I don't. Good. Because here's what I see when I look at you. I see a woman who was attacked in her own home, and instead of hiding or giving up, she stood up and demanded justice. I see a soldier who chose duty over convenience, even when it cost her everything. That's the kind of person I want serving beside me. That same week, Emily received a call from Detective Park with an update that changed everything. Specialist Carter, we've had a breakthrough. During our investigation into Nathan Sullivan's activities, we discovered something important. You're not his first victim. Emily felt her heart rate increase. What do you mean? We found 2 other women who were assaulted by Nathan Sullivan over the past 2 years. Both incidents were reported to civilian police but never prosecuted because the victims were pressured to drop charges. How were they pressured? Similar methods to what was used on you. Threats about their personal lives, intimidation, promises that Nathan would get help instead of facing consequences. Both women eventually moved away rather than pursue justice. Emily was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Detective Park, does this mean I might not be the only one if I don't follow through with the charges? That's exactly what it means. And Emily, both of these women want to testify on your behalf. They're willing to come forward now because they know they're not alone anymore. After hanging up with Detective Park, Emily sat in her quarters and tried to understand what she was feeling. Relief that she wasn't the only one, anger that Nathan had done this before, determination that he wouldn't do it again. But mostly she felt a sense of responsibility. Those other women had been where she was now, facing the same choice between seeking justice and accepting the easier path of silence. They had chosen silence not because they were weak but because they were alone. Emily wasn't alone. She had Pat, she had Detective Park, she had legal support, and she had the backing of the military justice system. That gave her advantages the other women hadn't had. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Drop the charges or things will get worse for you. Instead of feeling scared, Emily felt angry. She immediately forwarded the text to Detective Park and then blocked the number. She wasn't going to be intimidated by anonymous threats. That night, Emily called Attorney Chen to discuss the new developments in the case. This is actually very good for your position, the attorney explained. A pattern of behavior like this makes it much harder for Nathan's defense team to claim that this was an isolated incident or a misunderstanding. It shows intent and method. What about the threats I'm receiving? Document everything and report them to police. Witness intimidation is a serious crime, and each incident they can prove just adds to the charges Nathan and potentially Ryan could face. After ending the call, Emily realized that this case had become about much more than her own assault. This was about preventing Nathan from hurting other women, about showing Ryan that his choices had consequences, and about proving that people who commit crimes can't hide behind family loyalty. She was no longer just seeking justice for herself. She was fighting for every woman Nathan had hurt and every woman he might hurt in the future. That was a fight worth having. 2 weeks after the assault, Emily was approached by a woman she didn't recognize while eating lunch alone in the base mess hall. The woman was about her age, with short brown hair and the confident posture of someone used to handling difficult situations. "Are you Specialist Emily Carter?" the woman asked. "Yes. Can I help you?" The woman sat down across from Emily and extended her hand. "I'm Rebecca Thompson. I work for the Military Family Life Counseling Program. Detective Park gave me your contact information and said you might benefit from connecting with someone who understands what you're going through." Emily shook Rebecca's hand cautiously. She had been approached by several people over the past few weeks, some offering genuine support, others just curious about the gossip surrounding her case. "What kind of understanding are we talking about?" Rebecca leaned forward slightly. "The understanding that comes from being a military spouse who was assaulted by her husband's family member and then blamed for causing problems when she reported it." Emily set down her fork and really looked at Rebecca for the first time. "That happened to you?" 3 years ago. Different base, similar situation. My husband's cousin attacked me at a family gathering after I refused to lend him money. My husband said I was being dramatic, and that I should just let it go for the sake of family peace. What did you do? At first, nothing. I believed my husband when he said it would be better for everyone if we just moved past it. I thought maybe I was being too sensitive, maybe I should just be grateful it wasn't worse. Rebecca paused and took a sip of her coffee. But then I found out from other family members that his cousin had a history of violence against women. And I realized that my silence wasn't protecting anyone, it was just enabling him to hurt other people. So you reported it? I did. And just like you, I faced pressure to drop the charges. I was told I was being disloyal, that I was destroying the family, that I was ruining everyone's life over one small incident. Emily felt a familiar tight feeling in her chest. How did you get through it? I found people who believed me and supported me. I connected with other survivors who reminded me that seeking justice isn't revenge, it's responsibility. And I learned that sometimes doing the right thing means being willing to be unpopular. Rebecca reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. I run a support group now for military family members who have experienced domestic violence or assault. We meet twice a week, and we provide practical support, legal resources, counseling referrals, help with housing or financial issues. Emily looked at the card. How many people are in the group? Right now we have 12 regular members. Some are still married to their spouses, some have left, some are in various stages of legal proceedings. But all of them understand what it's like to have your safety threatened by someone who should have protected you. That evening, Emily attended her first support group meeting in a small conference room at the base family services building. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she found herself in a circle with 11 other people, 10 women and 1 man, all with different stories but similar experiences. There was Janet, whose husband's gambling debts had led to threats from loan sharks and her husband's decision to use Janet's military benefits as collateral. There was Michael, whose wife's brother had assaulted him and whose wife had blamed Michael for provoking the attack. There was Sarah, whose father-in-law had been sexually inappropriate with her and whose husband had insisted she was misunderstanding his intentions. Each person shared their story without judgment or advice from the others. They just listened, nodded, and offered the kind of understanding that can only come from shared experience. When it was Emily's turn to speak, she found herself telling the complete story, not just the assault, but the months of watching Nathan's criminal behavior, her attempts to address it with Ryan, and the betrayal of watching her husband choose his brother over her safety. "What's been hardest for you?" Rebecca asked when Emily finished. Emily thought for a moment. "The loneliness, I think. Ryan and Nathan have their whole family supporting them. Nathan's parents are saying I'm lying, that I'm trying to destroy their family. Ryan's friends are saying I should have been more understanding of family loyalty. Sometimes I feel like I'm the only person who thinks what happened was wrong. Janet nodded. That's the hardest part. When everyone around you is telling you that black is white, you start to question your own perception of reality. But here's what I learned, said Michael. The people who are telling you to be quiet, to let it go, to think about the family, those people aren't thinking about your family. They're not thinking about your safety, your well-being, or your future. They're thinking about their own comfort. Sarah added, and here's something else. If the roles were reversed, if you had attacked Nathan and Ryan had just stood there watching, do you think Nathan's family would be telling him to let it go for the sake of family peace? Emily knew the answer immediately. No. They'd want me arrested and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Exactly, Rebecca said. So why should different standards apply when you're the victim? Over the following weeks, Emily found herself looking forward to the support group meetings. For 2 hours twice a week, she was in a room full of people who understood exactly what she was going through and who never questioned whether she was doing the right thing. The group also provided practical help. When Emily mentioned that she was worried about her safety living alone on base, 3 different people offered to check on her regularly or be available for emergency phone calls. When she expressed concern about the legal costs of the divorce, Rebecca connected her with resources for low-cost legal aid for military families. Most importantly, the support group helped Emily see her situation in a broader context. She wasn't just dealing with one violent man and one cowardly husband, she was confronting a pattern of behavior that affected many military families, where loyalty to family was often used to protect abusers and silence victims. Emily, Rebecca said after one particularly difficult meeting where Emily had shared her fears about testifying in court, I want you to remember something. Every time someone like you chooses to report, to testify, to demand justice, it makes it easier for the next person to do the same thing. What do you mean? 3 years ago when I was going through this, I felt completely alone. I didn't know anyone else who had been through something similar. I didn't know there were resources available to help me. I almost gave up several times because I thought I was the only person who had ever faced this choice. Rebecca looked around the room at the other group members. But because I didn't give up, because I followed through with reporting and testifying, the case was documented. When Detective Park was investigating Nathan's pattern of behavior, my case file was one of the pieces of evidence that helped establish his history of violence. Emily felt a chill of understanding. So your case helped mine? Yes. And your case is going to help the next person who Nathan tries to hurt. And more than that, your willingness to speak up publicly about what happened is going to help other military spouses who are facing similar situations. Janet leaned forward. Emily, since your story started getting attention on base, I've had 3 different people approach me privately to tell me about violence or abuse in their own families. People who had never told anyone before, who thought they were alone. Emily was quiet for a moment, processing this information. I never thought about it that way. I was just trying to get justice for what happened to me. And that's exactly why it's working, Michael said. You're not trying to be a hero or make a political statement. You're just refusing to accept that what happened to you was okay. That's the most powerful kind of advocacy there is. By the end of her 3rd week attending support group meetings, Emily realized that she had found something she hadn't expected, a sense of purpose beyond her own case. She was still focused on getting justice for Nathan's assault and holding Ryan accountable for his choices, but now she also understood that her actions had implications for other people facing similar situations. Detective Park called that Friday with another update. Emily, we've made an arrest. Nathan Sullivan was taken into custody this morning on charges related to drug distribution. The assault charges are being processed separately, but having him in custody makes everyone safer. Emily felt a surge of relief and vindication. What about Ryan? We're still building the case against him. His phone records show extensive communication with Nathan during the time period when the drug activities were taking place, and we have witnesses who saw him at some of the locations you mentioned in your notes. Will he be arrested too? It's likely, but I can't give you a timeline yet. These things take time to build properly. That weekend, Emily was approached by someone unexpected. Ryan's sister, Jennifer, whom Emily had always gotten along with during family gatherings. Emily, I heard about what happened, Jennifer said, catching up with Emily after a support group meeting. I need you to know that not everyone in Ryan's family agrees with how this is being handled. Emily was surprised. She had assumed that all of Ryan's family would side with him and Nathan automatically. What do you mean? Jennifer looked around nervously before answering. Nathan has always been trouble. Always. Even when we were kids, he was violent and manipulative. My parents have spent 20 years making excuses for him and cleaning up his messes. Then why is everyone supporting him now? Because they're scared. Nathan has information about things other family members have done, financial stuff, legal problems, personal issues. He's been using that information to keep people quiet and supportive for years. Emily felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. So it's not really about family loyalty. It's about fear. Exactly. And Emily, I think Ryan is scared too. I don't think he wanted Nathan to hurt you, but I think he's trapped in a situation where he feels like he can't choose sides. Jennifer, Ryan did choose sides. He chose Nathan. He watched his brother attack me and then threatened my career when I tried to report it. Jennifer nodded sadly. I know. And I'm not making excuses for him. What he did was wrong and you deserve better. I just wanted you to know that there are people in the family who see what's really happening here. Does that mean you'd be willing to testify about Nathan's history of violence? Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. I need to think about it. If I testify against Nathan, there could be consequences for my whole family. Emily understood Jennifer's position, but she also felt frustrated. Jennifer, there are consequences for your family either way. The question is whether those consequences fall on Nathan for his criminal behavior, or on his victims for speaking up about it. Jennifer left without making any commitments, but Emily could tell that the conversation had given her something to think about. That night, Emily reflected on how much her perspective had changed over the past few weeks. A month ago, she had been focused entirely on her marriage, her career, and keeping peace within her family relationships. She had seen the violence and criminal behavior around her as someone else's problem that she reluctantly felt obligated to report. Now she understood that there was no such thing as someone else's problem when it came to violence and abuse. Every person who stayed silent, every family member who prioritized appearance over safety, every institution that pressured victims to move on for the sake of peace, all of these responses created an environment where people like Nathan could continue hurting others. Emily wasn't just seeking justice for herself anymore. She was taking a stand against a system that protected abusers and silenced victims. And for the first time since the assault, she felt truly proud of the choices she was making. 1 month after the assault, Emily received a call that would change everything. It was Detective Park, and her voice carried an excitement that Emily hadn't heard before. Emily, we need to meet. Today. Can you come to the station this afternoon? Of course. What's happened? I can't discuss it over the phone, but let's just say that Nathan Sullivan's house of cards is starting to collapse. Emily arrived at the police station to find Detective Park's office buzzing with activity. There were boxes of evidence, multiple case files spread across the desk, and what appeared to be surveillance photos pinned to a bulletin board. Emily, sit down. What I'm about to tell you is going to change how you understand everything that's been happening. Detective Park pulled out a thick folder. We executed a search warrant on Nathan Sullivan's apartment yesterday. What we found goes far beyond simple drug distribution. She opened the folder and showed Emily a series of photographs and documents. Nathan has been running a much larger operation than we initially suspected. He's been using military personnel and their families to transport drugs across state lines, taking advantage of the fact that military vehicles and personnel face less scrutiny at certain checkpoints. Emily felt her stomach drop. Military personnel? Who? That's where it gets complicated. We found records indicating that Nathan has been recruiting military spouses and family members to unknowingly transport packages. He tells them it's legitimate business merchandise, pays them well for what seems like simple delivery work, and they have no idea they're actually moving drugs. So some military families are victims too? Yes. But Emily, we also found evidence that some people knew exactly what they were doing. And your husband appears to be one of them. Detective Park pulled out a series of text messages and phone records. Ryan wasn't just standing by while his brother committed crimes. He was actively participating. He helped recruit other military personnel, he provided information about base security procedures, and he received payments for his involvement. Emily stared at the evidence in front of her. Text messages between Ryan and Nathan discussing packages, deliveries, and security concerns. Bank records showing regular deposits into Ryan's account from an untraceable source. Photos of Ryan meeting with people Emily didn't recognize in locations off base. How long has this been going on? Based on the records we found, at least 8 months. Possibly longer. Emily felt like she was seeing her entire marriage through a different lens. The secretive phone calls, the unexplained money, the new expensive items Ryan had claimed were gifts from friends, it had all been connected to criminal activity. There's more, Detective Park continued. We found a recording device in Nathan's apartment. He's been secretly recording conversations with his recruits and accomplices, apparently as insurance in case anyone tried to turn against him. She pressed play on a small digital recorder. Emily heard Nathan's voice, followed by Ryan's. What if Emily doesn't drop this? What if she keeps pushing the investigation? Then we make sure she has bigger problems to worry about. I've got enough dirt on her drinking to destroy her career, and if that doesn't work, we can always arrange for her to have another accident. Emily felt cold. Ryan, her husband, the man she had loved and trusted, was discussing ways to destroy her career and possibly harm her physically. There's one more recording I need you to hear, Detective Park said gently. This one was made the night you were assaulted. The recording was poor quality, but Emily could clearly hear her own voice pleading with Nathan to stop, Ryan telling Nathan to make sure she understands, and Nathan saying, maybe a few bruises will remind her to mind her own business. For the first time since the assault, Emily broke down completely. She had known that Ryan had failed to protect her, but hearing him actively participate in planning her attack was devastating in a way she hadn't expected. Detective Park handed her tissues and waited patiently while Emily processed what she had heard. Emily, I know this is incredibly difficult. But this evidence gives us everything we need to prosecute both Nathan and Ryan for multiple felonies. Conspiracy, drug trafficking, assault, witness intimidation. The charges are going to be extensive. Will Ryan be arrested? Today. Federal agents are moving on both Nathan and Ryan simultaneously. By this evening, they'll both be in custody. Emily felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that they would finally face consequences for their actions. Sadness that her marriage was truly over. Anger at the depth of Ryan's betrayal. And underneath it all, a sense of vindication that she had been right to trust her instincts and demand justice. What happens now? Now you prepare to testify. This is going to go to trial, and your testimony will be crucial for putting both of them away for a significant amount of time. That evening, Emily sat in her quarters and tried to process everything she had learned. Ryan hadn't just failed to protect her from his brother's violence, he had actively participated in planning it. He hadn't just been weak or conflicted about family loyalty, he had been a willing participant in criminal activities that put military personnel and their families at risk. Her phone rang. It was Rebecca from the support group. Emily, I heard about the arrest. How are you doing? I'm not sure. Relieved, I think. But also just empty. Finding out that Ryan was involved in planning the attack, it makes everything feel different. Different how? For the past month, I've been grieving the loss of my marriage. I've been sad about losing someone I loved, even though I knew I had to leave him. But now I'm realizing that the person I thought I loved never really existed. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. That's one of the hardest parts of situations like this. When you realize that the person you trusted with your heart was capable of planning to hurt you, it makes you question everything you thought you knew about love, about relationships, about your own judgment. Exactly. How do I trust my own judgment about people after this? The same way you trusted it when you decided to report Nathan's criminal activity, even though it would have been easier to stay quiet. The same way you trusted it when you left Ryan, even though everyone was telling you to work things out. Emily, your judgment isn't the problem here. Your judgment is what kept you safe and got justice for yourself and other victims. After hanging up with Rebecca, Emily realized that she needed to do something symbolic to mark this new understanding of her situation. She went to her closet and pulled out all of Ryan's belongings that were still in her quarters, a few shirts he had left behind, a coffee mug, some books. She packed everything into a box and wrote a note to include with it. Ryan, I heard the recordings today. I know now that you didn't just fail to protect me from your brother's violence, you helped plan it. I know that our entire marriage was built on lies about who you really are and what you're really capable of. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. Don't contact me. Don't ask for forgiveness. Don't try to explain. There's nothing left to say. Emily. The next morning, Emily delivered the box to the military police station to be forwarded to Ryan in custody. Walking back to her quarters, she felt lighter than she had in months. For the first time since the assault, Emily wasn't thinking about Ryan at all. She wasn't mourning her marriage, she wasn't second-guessing her decisions, and she wasn't wondering if things could have been different. She was thinking about the future, about testifying in court, about helping other victims, about rebuilding her life on her own terms. She was thinking about freedom. The pressure began almost immediately after Ryan and Nathan's arrests. Emily's phone started ringing constantly with calls from Nathan's family members, Ryan's friends, and even some of their mutual acquaintances, all trying to convince her to reconsider her testimony. Ryan's mother, Patricia, showed up at the base demanding to speak with Emily. When Emily agreed to meet her in a public place at the base coffee shop, Patricia came armed with tissues, family photos, and a speech about forgiveness and redemption. Emily, honey, I know you're hurt and angry, but Ryan is still your husband. He made some mistakes, but destroying his life isn't going to fix anything. Emily looked at the family photos Patricia had spread across the table, pictures of Ryan and Emily's wedding, holiday gatherings, happier times. A month ago, these images might have weakened her resolve. Now they just reminded her of how expertly Ryan had hidden his true nature. Mrs. Patterson, Ryan participated in planning an assault against me. He was involved in criminal activities that put other military families at risk. These aren't mistakes, they're choices. But he's never been violent with you before this one incident. This wasn't one incident, Emily interrupted. For months, Ryan was lying to me, stealing from the military and endangering other people. The assault was just the moment when I finally saw who he really was. Patricia's approach changed from pleading to manipulation. Emily, if you testify against Ryan, you'll destroy his military career. He'll be dishonorably discharged, lose his benefits, probably go to prison. Is that really what you want for someone you once loved? Emily felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came with being blamed for other people's choices. But now she recognized it for what it was, an attempt to make her responsible for consequences that Ryan had brought on himself. Mrs. Patterson, Ryan destroyed his own military career when he decided to commit crimes. He destroyed his own future when he chose to help his brother assault his wife. I didn't create these consequences, I just refused to help him hide from them. When Patricia realized that guilt and manipulation weren't working, she tried a different approach: bribes. What if Ryan agreed to divorce you quietly and give you everything? The house, his retirement benefits, even some cash payment for your pain and suffering? You could start fresh with enough money to build whatever life you want. Emily stood up from the table. Mrs. Patterson, you're asking me to take money in exchange for letting violent criminals avoid justice. You're asking me to betray other victims and put future victims at risk so your son doesn't face consequences for his crimes. Do you understand how wrong that is? I understand that you're destroying an entire family because you can't forgive one mistake. No, Emily said firmly. Ryan and Nathan destroyed your family when they chose to become criminals. I'm just refusing to help you cover it up. Similar conversations happened throughout the week with different people. Ryan's best friend called to tell Emily that she was ruining a good man's life over a family dispute. Nathan's girlfriend showed up at Emily's workplace to plead with her to think about the children, Nathan's young nephews, who would grow up without their uncle if he went to prison. Each conversation followed the same pattern: minimize the severity of the crimes, maximize Emily's responsibility for the consequences, and suggest that her demand for justice was actually vindictive revenge. The most difficult conversation came from an unexpected source: Emily's own mother, who called after hearing about the arrests from other family members. Emily, sweetheart, I'm worried about you. Everyone I've talked to says you're taking this too far. Who is everyone, Mom? Well, your Aunt Linda knows someone who knows Ryan's family, and they're saying that you're exaggerating what happened because you're angry about the divorce. Emily felt a familiar sense of isolation creeping in. Even her own mother was questioning her version of events based on secondhand gossip. Mom, I have medical records of my injuries. I have recordings of Ryan and Nathan planning the assault. I have evidence of their criminal activities. This isn't about anger or exaggeration, it's about documented crimes. But honey, is it really worth destroying your husband's entire life? Maybe you could work things out in counseling. Mom, stop. Emily's voice was sharper than she intended. Ryan participated in planning to have me beaten. He was involved in drug trafficking that put other military families at risk. There is no working things out from that. I just think you should consider forgiveness. Marriage is supposed to be for better or worse. Marriage vows don't include for better or worse or until you help your brother assault me, Emily said. Mom, I need you to support me right now, not question my decisions based on gossip from people who don't know what really happened. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Of course I support you, Emily. I just don't want you to make decisions you'll regret later. The only thing I regret is not trusting my instincts sooner. The pressure campaign reached its peak when Emily received a call from a lawyer she had never heard of, claiming to represent interested parties, who wanted to discuss a mutually beneficial resolution to the criminal cases. Emily immediately called attorney Chin to ask if she should take the meeting. Absolutely not, Chin said firmly. This sounds like someone trying to offer you money or other incentives to change your testimony or drop charges. That's witness tampering and it's a felony. Don't take any more calls from unknown lawyers and document any attempts to contact you. That evening at the support group meeting, Emily shared her frustration with the constant pressure she was facing. I knew testifying would be difficult, she said. But I didn't expect the hardest part to be defending my right to seek justice to people who claim to care about me. Rebecca nodded knowingly. This is exactly what happened to me. When abusers and criminals face consequences, suddenly everyone becomes very concerned about forgiveness, and moving on, and not destroying lives. But notice how none of these people were concerned about your life when you were being threatened and assaulted. Janet added, it's also interesting how they frame seeking justice as revenge, but staying silent is framed as noble forgiveness. They're not really asking you to forgive, they're asking you to enable. Michael, who had been quiet for most of the meeting, finally spoke up. Emily, can I tell you something that helped me when I was facing similar pressure? Please. I realized that everyone telling me to let it go had one thing in common. They all had something to lose if the truth came out. Ryan's family doesn't want their reputation damaged. Your mutual friends don't want to feel uncomfortable at social gatherings. Even your mother probably doesn't want to deal with the complexity of having a daughter whose husband turned out to be a criminal. Michael leaned forward. But the people who are supporting you, Detective Park, Attorney Chin, Pat, everyone in this room, we don't have anything to gain from your decision except the satisfaction of seeing justice done. So whose advice do you think you should trust? Emily felt a sense of clarity that had been missing all week. The people who are supporting justice, not the people who are protecting criminals. Exactly. That night, Emily made a decision. She was going to stop engaging with anyone who tried to pressure her to drop charges or change her testimony. She would stop explaining her decisions to people who were more concerned with protecting abusers than supporting victims. And she would stop feeling guilty about the consequences that Ryan and Nathan faced for their own choices. She wrote a simple response that she planned to use for anyone who contacted her about the case going forward. I am testifying truthfully about crimes that were committed against me and others. If you're concerned about the consequences Ryan and Nathan face, I suggest you talk to them about why they chose to commit those crimes. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt like she had control over the situation again. The trial was still weeks away, but she was ready for it. She was ready to tell the truth and let justice take its course. The courthouse in Nashville was nothing like Emily had expected. She had imagined something grand and imposing, but instead found herself in a modern building that felt more like an office complex than a symbol of justice. As she walked through the metal detectors and down the hallway toward the courtroom, Emily tried to calm her nerves by focusing on her breathing techniques from basic training. Attorney Chin met her outside the courtroom doors. How are you feeling? Nervous, ready, scared. All at the same time. That's completely normal. Remember, you're not on trial here, they are. Your job is simply to tell the truth about what happened to you. The evidence speaks for itself. Inside the courtroom, Emily saw Nathan and Ryan sitting at separate defense tables with their attorneys. Nathan looked defiant, whispering frequently to his lawyer and occasionally glancing back at the gallery where his family members sat. Ryan looked smaller somehow, staring down at his hands and avoiding eye contact with everyone. Emily was struck by how ordinary they both looked. For months, these two men had dominated her thoughts, her fears, her legal preparations. But sitting in that courtroom, they just looked like two people who had made terrible choices and were finally facing consequences. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney Maria Rodriguez, a woman in her 40s with a reputation for being thorough and uncompromising in cases involving violence against women. ADA Rodriguez had met with Emily several times to prepare her testimony, always emphasizing that Emily's role was to simply tell the truth about her experiences. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, ADA Rodriguez began in her opening statement, this case is about power, control, and the abuse of trust. It's about two men who believed they could use violence and intimidation to silence a woman who threatened to expose their criminal activities. She walked over to a large screen where photos of Emily's injuries were displayed. Specialist Emily Carter was beaten in her own home by Nathan Sullivan while her husband, Ryan Patterson, stood by and watched. But this wasn't a random act of violence, it was a calculated attack designed to silence a witness to extensive criminal activity. ADA Rodriguez outlined the drug trafficking operation, the evidence of Ryan's participation, and the recordings that proved both men had planned the assault against Emily. The defense will try to convince you that this was a family dispute that got out of hand. They will try to suggest that Specialist Carter is exaggerating her injuries or lying about the circumstances. But the evidence, the medical records, the recordings, the financial documents, the testimony of other victims tells a different story. When it was Emily's turn to testify, she walked to the witness stand with her head held high. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, but all of her preparation felt inadequate now that she was actually facing the jury. Ada Rodriguez guided her through her testimony methodically. Emily described her military service, her marriage to Ryan, and the months of suspicious activity that had led her to start documenting potential criminal behavior. Can you describe for the jury what happened on the night of the assault? Emily took a deep breath and began recounting the events of that night. She described Nathan finding her evidence files, his rage when he realized what she had been documenting, and the attack that followed while Ryan stood by without intervening. Did your husband make any attempt to protect you or stop the assault? No. He stood in the doorway and watched. When it was over, he helped Nathan gather up my evidence files. How did you feel about your husband's response? Emily paused, trying to find words that conveyed the depth of that betrayal. I felt like I was married to a stranger. The man I had loved and trusted for 3 years had just watched someone beat me unconscious and then helped cover it up. During cross-examination, Nathan's attorney tried to suggest that Emily had attacked Nathan first and that he was defending himself. But the medical evidence made this argument impossible to sustain. Emily's injuries were all consistent with being beaten by someone much larger and stronger, while Nathan had no defensive wounds or injuries. Ryan's attorney took a different approach, trying to portray Ryan as a victim of his brother's manipulation who was too frightened to intervene during the assault. Mrs. Patterson, isn't it possible that your husband was also afraid of his brother? That he wanted to help you but was scared of becoming a victim himself? Emily looked directly at Ryan for the first time since entering the courtroom. He was finally looking back at her, and she could see something that might have been regret or pleading in his eyes. No, Emily said firmly. I've heard the recordings where Ryan helped plan the assault. I've seen the evidence of his participation in criminal activities. He wasn't afraid of his brother, he was his brother's partner. The prosecution's case included testimony from Detective Park about the investigation, medical testimony about Emily's injuries, and expert analysis of the recordings and financial evidence. Most powerfully, they presented testimony from the 2 other women who had been assaulted by Nathan in previous years. Both women described similar patterns. Nathan's initial violence, followed by pressure from family members to stay quiet, for the sake of family peace. Both had eventually moved away rather than pursue charges, but their testimony established a clear pattern of behavior that made Nathan's claims of self-defense impossible to believe. The defense's case was weak and contradictory. Nathan's attorney argued simultaneously that the assault never happened, that it was self-defense, and that it was a minor family disagreement blown out of proportion. Ryan's attorney focused on portraying Ryan as a passive bystander who was manipulated by his brother, but the recorded conversations made this argument ineffective. The most dramatic moment of the trial came when the prosecution played the recording of Nathan and Ryan discussing ways to silence Emily after the assault. As the jury listened to Ryan's voice discussing destroying Emily's career and arranging for her to have another accident, Emily watched several jury members turn to look at Ryan with expressions of disgust. In her closing argument, Ada Rodriguez brought the case back to its fundamental issue. This case isn't complicated, she told the jury. 2 men committed serious crimes. When they realized that Emily Carter had evidence of those crimes, they decided to use violence to silence her. When that violence wasn't enough, they threatened her career and considered further violence. She gestured toward Emily, who was sitting in the gallery behind the prosecution table. Specialist Carter had a choice to make after she was assaulted. She could stay quiet, protect her attackers and hope they would leave her alone. Or she could do what her military training and her personal values told her to do, seek justice and protect other potential victims. She chose justice. Now it's your turn to make a choice. Will you send the message that violence and intimidation are acceptable tools for silencing witnesses? Or will you send the message that in this community, criminals face consequences for their actions regardless of their family connections? The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When the verdict was read, Emily felt a sense of completion that she hadn't expected. Guilty on all counts for Nathan. Guilty on all counts for Ryan. The evidence had been overwhelming, and the jury had seen through every attempt to minimize or excuse their criminal behavior. Nathan was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for drug trafficking and assault. Ryan received 8 years for conspiracy and drug trafficking, plus additional time for witness intimidation. As Emily left the courthouse that day, she was approached by a young woman she didn't recognize. "Excuse me, are you Emily Carter?" "Yes." I'm Jessica Martinez. I'm Nathan Sullivan's ex-girlfriend from 2 years ago. I wanted to thank you. Emily was confused. Thank me for what? For being brave enough to testify. Nathan hit me too, but I was too scared to report it. When I heard that you had pressed charges and were testifying, it gave me the courage to contact the police about what he did to me. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. Because of your case, they're going to add charges related to what he did to me. He's going to face consequences for that too. Emily hugged Jessica, feeling a sense of purpose that went beyond her own case. I'm so sorry he hurt you. And I'm proud of you for coming forward. I'm proud of you too. You saved other women from going through what we went through. As Emily walked to her car, she realized that the trial hadn't just been about getting justice for herself. It had been about breaking a cycle of violence and silence that had protected Nathan for years and could have continued protecting him indefinitely. Justice had been served, but more importantly, the truth had been told. And that truth was going to make other potential victims safer. 6 months after the trial, Emily was promoted to staff sergeant. The promotion ceremony took place on a crisp October morning, with Pat Rodriguez pinning on Emily's new rank while her support group members and several colleagues watched from the audience. Congratulations, Staff Sergeant Carter, Pat said with a proud smile. You've earned this. Emily looked out at the small crowd of people who had supported her through the most difficult year of her life. Rebecca was there with several other support group members. Detective Park had taken time off to attend. Attorney Chin had driven down from Nashville. Even some of Emily's military colleagues who had initially been skeptical about her case were there to show their support. The promotion represented more than just career advancement. It was validation that Emily's decision to seek justice hadn't destroyed her military future as Nathan and Ryan had threatened. Instead, her courage and integrity had been recognized and rewarded. After the ceremony, Emily's commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Martinez, pulled her aside for a private conversation. Staff Sergeant Carter, I want to discuss a special assignment opportunity with you. Yes, ma'am. As you know, the military has been working to improve our response to domestic violence and sexual assault cases involving military personnel and their families. We're developing a new victim advocacy program, and we need experienced personnel to help implement it. Lieutenant Colonel Martinez handed Emily a folder. This position would involve training other military personnel on how to recognize and respond to domestic violence situations, working with military police and civilian law enforcement on joint cases, and providing support to victims navigating the military justice system. Emily opened the folder and read through the job description. It was exactly the kind of work she had discovered she was passionate about through her experience with the support group. The assignment would require additional training and certification, but it comes with a promotion track and the opportunity to make a real difference in how the military handles these situations. I'm very interested, ma'am. Good. I'm recommending you for the program based not just on your personal experience, but on your demonstrated leadership during a difficult situation and your commitment to helping others. That evening, Emily met with Rebecca and the support group to share her news about both the promotion and the new assignment opportunity. It sounds perfect for you, Rebecca said. You've become such a strong advocate for other victims, and having someone with your experience in an official military role could help so many people. Janet nodded. Emily, you've shown all of us what's possible when you refuse to accept that violence and abuse are just things you have to live with. Having you in a position to help other people make those same choices is going to save lives. Over the past 6 months, Emily had indeed become an unofficial advocate for other military spouses and family members dealing with domestic violence. People sought her out for advice, support, and sometimes just someone to listen who understood their situation. She had helped 3 different people navigate the process of reporting abuse, connected 2 families with legal resources, and provided testimony in 1 other criminal case involving military personnel. The work was emotionally challenging, but it gave Emily a sense of purpose that went beyond her regular duties as a medic. She had discovered that her experience with Nathan and Ryan, as traumatic as it had been, had given her unique insights and credibility that could help other people in similar situations. There's something else I want to tell you all, Emily said to the group. I've been seeing someone. Rebecca's eyes lit up. Really? Tell us about him. His name is James and he's a physical therapist who works with veterans. We met at a charity run for wounded warriors that I participated in a few months ago. Emily smiled as she thought about James. He was kind, patient, and understood the demands of military life without being part of it himself. Most importantly, he had never once questioned Emily's decisions about seeking justice or suggested that she should have handled things differently. How does he feel about everything you've been through? Michael asked. He's incredibly supportive. When I told him about the assault and the trial, his first response was to say how proud he was of my courage. He's never made me feel like damaged goods or like I need to be fixed because of what happened. That's exactly how it should be, Rebecca said firmly. The right person will see your strength, not your scars. James had indeed been different from anyone Emily had dated before. He was genuinely interested in her advocacy work and had even volunteered to help with some of the support group's fundraising activities. He treated Emily as an equal partner, respected her independence, and never tried to protect her in ways that felt controlling or condescending. Most importantly, being with James had helped Emily realize that Ryan's betrayal hadn't broken her ability to trust. It had just taught her to trust more carefully and to recognize the difference between genuine support and manipulation. Are you thinking about marriage again? Sarah asked. Emily laughed. It's still early, but I'm not close to the possibility. The difference is that now I know what I need in a relationship and what I won't accept. I know the difference between someone who supports my strength and someone who tries to control my choices. That's the best thing that can come out of experiences like ours, Rebecca said. Learning to recognize healthy relationships and having the confidence to demand them. As the support group meeting ended and people began to leave, Emily reflected on how much her life had changed in the past year. A year ago, she had been trapped in a marriage with someone who was lying to her, endangering others, and ultimately planning to harm her. She had been isolated, confused, and making excuses for inexcusable behavior. Now she was thriving in her military career, building a relationship with someone who truly valued her, and using her experience to help other people in similar situations. The assault and divorce had been devastating, but they had also freed her from a life built on lies and given her the opportunity to discover who she really was and what she was truly capable of. That night, Emily called her mother to share the news about her promotion and new assignment. Emily, I'm so proud of you, her mother said, and for the first time in months, Emily could hear genuine warmth in her voice. I need to apologize for how I reacted when all of this first happened. I was scared for you and I didn't understand what you were really going through. It's okay, Mom. I know it was hard to understand from the outside. No, it's not okay. You needed my support and instead I questioned your judgment. But seeing how strong you've become, how you've turned this terrible experience into something that helps other people, I understand now that you made the right choices, even when they were the hard choices. Emily felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized she was carrying. Her mother's approval wasn't necessary for Emily to know she had done the right thing, but having it felt like a final piece of healing. Mom, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you initially react the way you did? What made you think I should stay with Ryan even after everything that happened? Her mother was quiet for a moment. I think I was projecting my own fears onto your situation. When your father left us, I felt like such a failure. I had always been taught that keeping a marriage together was the most important thing a woman could do, and when mine fell apart, I felt like I had failed at the most important job of my life. But Mom, Dad left because he chose to leave. That wasn't your failure. I know that now. And when you told me about Ryan, part of me was scared that you were giving up on your marriage the way I felt like I had given up on mine. But I see now that what you did wasn't giving up, it was refusing to accept unacceptable behavior. You were protecting yourself and other people, and that took incredible strength. Emily felt tears in her eyes. Thank you for saying that. It means a lot to hear it from you. I love you, Emily. And I'm proud of the woman you've become. After hanging up with her mother, Emily sat in her apartment, a new place she had moved to after the divorce was finalized, and looked around at the life she had built for herself. The space was decorated with things that reflected her personality and interests, not compromises made to accommodate someone else's preferences. Photos from her military service, books about advocacy and trauma recovery, and artwork from local artists she supported. On her refrigerator was a card from Jessica Martinez, the woman who had thanked her outside the courthouse. Jessica had sent updates over the months, sharing that she was in counseling, had started dating someone new, and was considering going back to school. At the bottom of her most recent card, Jessica had written, "Thank you for showing me that I deserved better." Emily realized that this helping other people recognize their own worth and find the courage to demand better treatment had become her life's work. The military assignment would make it official, but she had been doing this work informally for months. Her phone buzzed with a text from James. How did the promotion ceremony go? Can't wait to hear all about it. Dinner tomorrow to celebrate? Emily smiled as she typed back, "It was perfect. Yes to dinner. I have so much to tell you." For the first time in over a year, Emily felt completely at peace with her life. She had faced her worst nightmare, being betrayed and attacked by people who were supposed to protect her, and had not only survived but thrived. She had turned her trauma into purpose, her pain into power, and her experience into a tool for helping others. The woman who had been beaten in her army quarters at midnight was gone. In her place was someone stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to make sure that justice prevailed over silence, that truth mattered more than appearances, and that no one should have to choose between safety and family loyalty. Emily Carter was no longer a victim. She was a survivor, an advocate, and a force for change. And she was just getting started. 2 years after the trial, Staff Sergeant Emily Carter stood before a room full of military personnel, law enforcement officers, and victim advocates, delivering the keynote address at the annual Military Family Safety Conference. Her voice was strong and confident as she spoke about the importance of breaking cycles of silence around domestic violence. 2.5 years ago, I was beaten unconscious in my own home by my brother-in-law while my husband watched and did nothing to stop it, Emily began. I could have stayed silent. I could have accepted their threats and intimidation. I could have prioritized family peace over personal safety. She paused and looked out at the audience of nearly 300 people. But I didn't. And because I chose to speak up, to seek justice, and to demand accountability, Nathan Sullivan is in prison where he can't hurt other women. Ryan Patterson faced consequences for his criminal activities and his role in planning my assault. And most importantly, other victims found the courage to come forward. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. Since my case went public, 17 other women have contacted law enforcement to report assaults or abuse by Nathan Sullivan or his associates. 17 women who had been silent for years found their voices because they saw that it was possible to seek justice and survive. Emily had been invited to speak at conferences like this one across the country. Her story had become a case study in military training programs, and she had consulted on policy changes designed to better protect military families from domestic violence. But the work that meant the most to her was still the one-on-one conversations with individual victims who reached out for support and guidance. After her speech, Emily was approached by a young woman in military uniform who looked nervous but determined. "Staff Sergeant Carter? I'm Specialist Monica Torres. I was wondering if I could speak with you privately." Emily recognized the look in Monica's eyes immediately, the same mixture of fear, anger, and desperate hope that she remembered feeling herself 2 years ago. "Of course. Let's find somewhere quiet to talk." They found an empty conference room and Monica began telling her story. Her husband's gambling debts had led to threats from dangerous people. When Monica tried to report the situation, her husband had threatened to claim she was mentally unstable and unfit for military service. "I know I need to leave him," Monica said, tears streaming down her face. "But I'm scared of what he'll do to my career, to my reputation. And part of me still loves the person I thought he was." Emily handed Monica tissues and waited for her to collect herself before responding. "Monica, everything you're feeling right now is normal. The fear, the confusion, the grief for the person you thought you married, I felt all of that too. But here's what I need you to understand. Staying in this situation isn't going to protect your career or your reputation. It's going to put you in danger." Emily pulled out her phone and showed Monica a photo from her own case file, the pictures of her injuries from the night Nathan attacked her. "This is what happened to me when I waited too long to act. I don't want this to happen to you." Over the next hour, Emily walked Monica through the same process she had helped dozens of other women navigate. Documenting the threats, connecting with military victim advocates, understanding legal options, and building a safety plan. "The most important thing to remember," Emily told Monica, "is that you're not responsible for his choices or their consequences. Your only responsibility is to keep yourself safe and to do what's right." As Monica left the conference room with a folder full of resources and contact information, Emily felt the familiar sense of satisfaction that came from helping someone take the first steps towards safety and justice. That evening, Emily returned to her hotel room to find a message waiting for her from James. They had been married for 6 months now, in a small ceremony attended by the support group members, Emily's mother, and James's family. The marriage was everything Emily's first marriage hadn't been built on: honesty, mutual respect, and genuine partnership. "How did the conference go?" James had texted. "Can't wait to hear about it when you get home tomorrow." Emily smiled as she typed back, "Amazing. Helped another woman get started on her journey to safety. Coming home to you tomorrow feels perfect." The next morning, as Emily's flight prepared to land back home, she reflected on how completely her life had changed. She was now the senior victim advocate for her military district, had testified before Congress about needed policy changes, and had written a manual for military personnel responding to domestic violence cases. But beyond her professional achievements, Emily had discovered something she hadn't expected. She was genuinely happy. Not just satisfied or content, but actively joyful about her life and excited about her future. The trauma of Nathan's assault and Ryan's betrayal would always be part of her story, but it was no longer the defining chapter. Instead, it had become the catalyst for everything good that had followed her advocacy work, her stronger relationships, her deeper understanding of her own strength and values. As Emily walked through the airport toward the baggage claim, she spotted a familiar figure waiting for her. Ryan. He looked older, thinner, and was wearing civilian clothes. Emily realized that he must have been released early for good behavior, though she hadn't kept track of his prison sentence after the trial ended. For a moment, Emily felt a flash of the old fear and anxiety that Ryan's presence used to trigger. But as she really looked at him, she realized that he had no power over her anymore. He was just a man who had made terrible choices and was now living with the consequences. Ryan approached her cautiously, his hands visible and his posture non-threatening. Emily, I know I have no right to talk to you, but I wanted to say something. Emily set down her carry-on bag and faced him directly. What do you want, Ryan? I wanted to apologize. Really apologize, not the fake apologies I gave during the trial when I was trying to minimize my sentence. Emily waited for him to continue. I know what I did was unforgivable. I know that participating in planning to hurt you was evil. I know that betraying your trust and putting you in danger was the worst thing I've ever done. Ryan's voice was shaky, but he maintained eye contact. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know that I understand now how wrong I was, and that I'm sorry. Emily studied Ryan's face, looking for signs of manipulation or self-serving motives behind his apology. But what she saw was genuine remorse and shame. Ryan, I appreciate that you've come to understand how wrong your actions were. But I need you to understand something. I don't need your apology to move on with my life. I moved on a long time ago. I know. I can see that. And I'm glad you did. Emily picked up her bag again. I hope you've learned something from all of this. I hope you never hurt anyone else the way you hurt me. But my life is good now, and I don't want you to be part of it. I understand. I'm proud of what you've accomplished. The advocacy work, helping other people. You turned something terrible into something that's saving lives. Emily felt a moment of surprise at Ryan's words, but she realized that his opinion, positive or negative, no longer mattered to her. Goodbye, Ryan. Goodbye, Emily. As Emily walked away from Ryan and toward the exit where James was waiting to pick her up, she felt a sense of completion that she hadn't expected. Seeing Ryan again had confirmed something she had suspected but wasn't entirely sure of. She had truly moved beyond the trauma he had caused her. The woman who had been broken and betrayed in her army quarters at midnight was gone. In her place was someone stronger, wiser, and more purposeful than she had ever imagined possible. Emily Carter had not just survived, she had transformed her pain into power, her trauma into triumph, and her worst experience into her greatest source of meaning and purpose. As she spotted James waiting for her with a smile and a sign that read, "Welcome home, my hero," Emily felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the life she had built from the ashes of her old one. She was home. She was safe. She was loved. And she was making a difference in the world. The nightmare that had begun at midnight in her army quarters had led her to everything she had never known she wanted. Emily Carter was finally, completely, triumphantly free.